Fertility Podcast has been sharing expert content and patient stories now for a whole decade. If this is your first listen, welcome. My name is Natalie Silverman and I launched the podcast once pregnant after ICSI treatment as I wanted to use my broadcasting background to lessen the taboo on this difficult topic. Whilst I spent the first year being anonymous, as my audience grew, so did I. And once I put my name to the pod, everything changed. Since then, I've continued to work in the patient advocacy space, and the Fertility Podcast has gone from strength to strength, so we thank you for your support. Kate joined me as co-host in 2019, and whilst I've loved every minute of making this for you, I love even more that you now have Kate at the helm as your host. Kate is an independent fertility nurse consultant, and you couldn't be in safer hands. I'm currently spending my days working hard with Fertility Matters at Work to help the workplace become more fertility friendly. For those of us trying to manage our jobs alongside trying to become parents, we're dedicated to helping you feel less alone. And if the Fertility Podcast has helped you in any way, please do take a moment once you've listened to hit the follow or subscribe button, and if you want to leave us a review, that would be amazing. Help us celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Fertility Podcast in style. Enjoy the show.
Have you ever heard of the term ectopic pregnancy? And if you have, do you really know what it's all about? Hello, and welcome to the second episode in this new series. It's great to have you here. Today we're, as I just said, going to be talking all about ectopic pregnancy. But before we dive in, just a couple of things to let you know. Firstly, this episode comes with a trigger warning, and that's because we're going to be discussing the sensitive subjects of miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy. So if today is a day that you're not feeling particularly strong, then maybe leave this episode for later on. We've got a huge back catalogue, so if there's anything else that you want to listen to, go and take a look, and there might be something that just takes your fancy. But today, if you're not quite with it, then maybe this one could just be put aside for a little while longer. But secondly, just wanted to let you know a bit of fertility news, because I'm always one to share information as much as I get it. In fact, I've got a couple of bits of fertility news. So firstly, my friend and colleague Kate Pleece has joined the podcast fraternity, and she's started a podcast all about premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI is its other name. And it's called the Premature Menocast. So if this is you, if you have suffered from POI, or you're struggling and living with POI, then this might be just the podcast that you need, apart from this one, obviously. But Kate has started this podcast with 3 other women, all who have suffered and are suffering with POI. And they're kind of talking about what it's like to live with POI and how to cope. So it's a great one. First episode is just out. You can find it on Spotify, but I'll also put a link in the show notes for you. So there's a new report out by Endometriosis UK, and this is a survey based on just over 4,000, between 4,000 and 4,500 individuals who were diagnosed with endometriosis. And it's all about their time to diagnosis. And we know that traditionally, we kind of talk about it takes 8 years in which to get a diagnosis of endometriosis, which is shocking in itself. But what's even more shocking as this time has now increased. So in England and Scotland, it's taken on average 8 years and 10 months. In Northern Ireland, it's taking 9 years and 5 months in which to get a diagnosis. And even more shocking, in Wales, it's taking on average 9 years and 11 months. It's just absolutely horrendous. And I don't know how we're ever going to make changes when it comes to getting a diagnosis for women's health conditions, endometriosis being one of them, but PCOS being another. It frustrates the hell out of me. I'm reading a fantastic book at the moment all about the gender health gap. It's just driving me insane. I'll share information about gender health gap book that I'm reading later on another episode, because I feel that it's an area that we probably need to look at with the podcast to discuss that in more detail. So I will definitely be sharing more information. But anyway, so there's some news, some good news, some exciting news, but also some not good news. But that's what it's like in the world of fertility. So let's get on with the show. So today I am joined by Jade, who shares her story of miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy. So buckle up because it's one hell of a ride, but let's bring Jade in. Hi, Jade. Welcome to the Fertility Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I'm really pleased to talk to you about your fertility journey because you experienced a significant fertility journey, which you're going to talk to us about. But this also includes ectopic pregnancy. And for anyone listening that doesn't know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's a pregnancy that is outside the uterus. Generally, it will be in the fallopian tubes, but sometimes it can be in other areas of the pelvis. And this can, as you can imagine, can cause a huge amount of problems. And sadly, the pregnancy isn't viable, so is unable to continue. And Jade's going to explain her story, which involves pregnancy loss both through a miscarriage, early miscarriage, but also ectopic pregnancy. So the floor is yours, Jade. Please tell us a little bit about what's happened for you over the last year or
so. So it's quite a long journey that's become quite complicated. If I'd have known this time at the start of last year that we'd be where we are now, I wouldn't have probably believed it. But it started for us. So we got married in November 2021. And we were very lucky to fall pregnant really quickly after then. So we found out we were pregnant in January 2022. It's something we both knew that we wanted for a really long time. So obviously we were overjoyed by that. Sadly, that resulted in a miscarriage at about 8 weeks. It happened very smoothly. The body did what it needed to do, and there were no further complications beyond there. So we were quite hopeful to, once we managed to gather ourselves again, to just try again. So that's what we did. And in the summer of last year, we got pregnant around, it was June time. And then I started to spot fairly soon after finding out I was pregnant, and I thought, this is it again, I think. But several trips to the early pregnancy unit, they confirmed it as ectopic via blood tests, but nothing was yet showing up in the tube. And then after a lot more trips to the early pregnancy unit, a lot more blood tests, it suddenly did show up on the ultrasound, and it was quite large by that point. So that resulted in, I'd had the methotrexate treatment to see if that could clear things, but that didn't work. So I ended up with surgery for that one. So I did lose my right tube in that instance.
And how many weeks pregnant were you then, Jade?
By the time I had my surgery, 9 weeks.
Wow, that's
so
quite
like a golf ball in the tube by that point, yeah. I'd had the methotrexate treatment, I think 2 weeks before then, and my HCG was just rising and rising and rising. I had no pain at all. I was actually tiling the floor of our porch the day that I had my surgery because I just felt totally fine. But I had the surgery and it was very simple. I was out the same day. But I was told that once you've had one ectopic, the chances of another ectopic are heightened. So I had that in the back of my mind. We then had another pregnancy in October last year, which failed really, really quickly. I miscarried that one really quickly between 5 and 6 weeks. And then we had a really quiet year this year. My cycle's been very irregular, and I haven't ovulated many times at all. But we just suddenly I went back on metformin, prescribed by my gynecologist, and I ovulated almost instantly after starting back on that, and we fell pregnant again, which was amazing news. I had my positive pregnancy test the morning we went on holiday to Krakow. So that was magical. And then again, the spotting started when we got back, and it didn't enter my mind that it could be another ectopic, but I thought, the options are open, we'll see. And I went to the early pregnancy unit, and they weren't overly concerned, and they said it's really early, you could have your dates wrong, and that might be why we can't see it in the womb. But I knew my dates were right. I knew I was between 5 and 6 weeks, and I was like, the fact that there's not even a gestational sac on the scan, I just didn't feel right. And I had a lot of pain in my lower back, but only on the left, which is where my remaining tube was. So again, after lots of trips to the early pregnancy unit, they said, I think we'll rule it as ectopic, so let's go down the line of treatment. So I chose the methotrexate again. And then 2 days later, I ruptured in hospital and had surgery again, this time with the tube being saved. And that was 11 days ago, so I'm 11 days post-surgery now.
Oh, bless you, bless you. I'm going to come to the ruptured ectopic side of it in a minute, because that's important to talk about. But I'm just intrigued about your symptoms, because the common symptoms of an ectopic pregnancy are that you might have some pain on one side of the abdomen or the other. You might have some spotting, and you can also get what's called shoulder tip pain. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I hadn't had any of that at all.
Yeah, which is really unusual, and especially with the first pregnancy at 9 weeks, because often an ectopic pregnancy can present around about 6 weeks, because by this point it's getting quite big if it's in the fallopian tubes, and it can start to cause pain, and obviously that's when you'll get the bleeding, and the referred pain is what causes the kind of shoulder tip pain. And so you had spotting, but you didn't have any other symptoms.
No, so in the so in the first ectopic, I had spotting, and I had quite a bit of a bleed, which made me think it was miscarriage. But then it was like a tap had been turned off, and my mum said, "Well, that's good, because your miscarriage was you experience a lot more bleeding and pain." I said, "No, this doesn't feel right. It feels like something's still inside of me. It doesn't feel like there's been enough of a clear. I feel like something's still there." And that's when my HCG was continuing to rise, but I had asked to be rescanned, but the unit was so busy and I just didn't get another rescan until probably 10 days later, which is when they found the golf ball sized mass in the tube, and they said, "We need to do surgery today." And I thought, really? I feel fine, and I can't believe how fine I felt. Whereas this time around, I started feeling pain in my on my like localized left side at like before 6 weeks, and it was severe pain as well. Nothing in my shoulder, but the pain was severe, and I was like, something is happening there. I don't know what it is, but something is unhappy and it's grumbling, and I can take quite a lot of pain, but this was a disturbance, a proper disturbance.
And that's really interesting, because often it is severe pain, but even that grumbly pain that you can get, and spotting, and you're showing really that it's a complete mixture of symptoms. But what is really interesting is that you knew something wasn't right. You knew 100%.
it.
Yeah. And it's trusting that gut feeling, isn't it, that we often have, and then doing something about it. And that can be quite difficult, I suspect, to advocate for yourself when you might not have necessarily the common symptoms, but something's not right. How do you put that across the doctors that I know
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I was at work on the Wednesday, and I just couldn't sit. I couldn't sit still. I was like trying to move my back around. I was fidgeting to sit on one side of my body to the other, and I was sweating, and I was trying to like bear it and take painkillers, until I just said to my boss, I just burst into tears and I said, "I'm in agony and I need to go." And I didn't drive home. I drove to hospital, and I went straight into the early pregnancy unit, who recognised me by this point. And I just said, I need to see someone. I'm in so much pain. And they said, "Well, we don't take walk-ins. You'd need to go to A&E." And I was like, I can't. And so she went and got the doctor, and she was like, "Oh, if you want to come in, and do you want to take a seat?" And I was like, "I can't sit down. I can't make my body fold. Like something's wrong." And then I didn't come out of hospital until 3 days later. So my body and my mind knew that is where you need to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I went.
And thank goodness that you listened to that. It really is.
Yeah.
When it comes to the ruptured ectopic, and again, just to reassure people, a ruptured ectopic is actually quite unusual these days. And the reason it's unusual is that we have really good monitoring. You have scans. You also, if anyone's concerned that you might have an ectopic pregnancy, then they do blood tests, the HCG, to see that how if they're rising correctly, which with HCG with a uterine pregnancy should rise double every 48 hours. With an ectopic pregnancy, it won't rise in the same way. It'll be slower. And so that kind of helps the doctors know what's going on, both the blood tests and the scan. So to have a ruptured ectopic, and I do remember in my gynae days, nursing women coming in with a ruptured ectopic, and it is a medical emergency, isn't it, Jade?
Oh yes, it is. Yeah.
Tell us then about what happened for you.
Yeah, so I obviously went straight to the early pregnancy unit. Thank God it was still within their hours where they could just take me straight away, because a doctor came in and was like, "Ooh, let's cannula. You are going to be staying in." She wasn't actually worried that there'd been a rupture, but she could tell that my level of pain, given that they knew that there was an ectopic pregnancy somewhere, they weren't happy with how much pain I was in. I felt instantly better, that I was in the safest place I could possibly be. So they admitted me. I messaged my husband and was like, "Don't panic, but I'm in hospital. I've had some pain. I'll let you know what happens. You go to the gym as normal. I'm sure it'll be okay." And then he saw me later, and the pain through the night just went up, 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 up. And two gynae consultants saw me in the night, and I was just tossing and turning. They had a feel around and said, "There's no sign of a rupture, but we'll do your bloods and we'll just monitor and give you more painkillers." It felt like the longest night. My mum saw me the next day, and I was really happy to see her and my husband again. And then my mother-in-law, who is a midwife, she worked in the hospital as well, so she came to see me. And as I was talking to her, I was just said, "Oh, something is just not right." And I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't turn on to my right. And she said, "Try your left and see how that feels." And I said, "No, I need to get out of bed." And suddenly I just burst into tears, and I had all my weight on my hands. I was like gripping the bed, and I felt like I was someone in labour. I was just like, "Oh, something is just," it felt hot and sharp. And you know, there's balloons that children have where people make like models out of them. It felt like my insides were just twisted and wrapped. So my mother-in-law went off and like called a nurse, and suddenly like 5 surgeons and doctors came in and had a good look, and they were scratching their heads, and they basically said, "We're trying to delay surgery to see if this settles down so we can try and save a tube," basically. And my mother-in-law, Corinne, said, "But how long do we wait? Like, look at her. She's just in agony." So they said, "We'll up the pain relief and see how she goes." And the pain relief did help short term, but that alarmed me that my symptoms were then masked by the amazing pain relief. Like, the lack of pain wasn't lack of problem.
Yeah.
But it at least gave me some respite for a little while. And they said, "We'll do another scan as well, just to see if anything's happening." So I said, "Fine." So then I think in about an hour, a porter came with a wheelchair to take me to the actual early pregnancy unit for the scan. And just as I got out of bed to get into the wheelchair, I just felt heavy and just ill. And by the time I got to the early pregnancy unit, within 5 minutes, I just felt worse. I could barely walk, and I couldn't stand up straight. I felt like if I stood up straight, something was pulling. And I saw the bed that I needed to get onto for the scan, and I looked at it, I thought, I don't even feel like I can get on. So my husband helped me on, and I've had loads of the internal scans now, and it's never even uncomfortable. It's just not pleasant, but it's always very gentle, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But this felt like when it went in, I could feel it was pushing against everything was just so swollen. And I could barely tolerate it. And as soon as she went inside, she went, "Oh, you've ruptured." And I just knew, because the level of pain I was in was insane. So the surgeon came and had a chat with me and said, "We will be doing the surgery." And she went through all the forms and stuff. And she said, "You'll go back to your ward now, and you'll have surgery probably at some point this evening when there's a slot." And just as they're about to wheel me off, I went, "No, I'm going to faint." And I just fully collapsed. So they wheeled me quickly into one of their side rooms, and I could feel all my sensation going, my hearing going, my vision going. And I was profusely sweating, and they tried to take my blood pressure on my arm, and that was low, like very low. And as soon as I vomited, I came round a bit, and they got a drip. I was already cannularised, so they did a drip, and that brought me round a bit. But I remember saying, like, "I need my mum." So I obviously know a rupture is really dangerous, especially having a previous ectopic. I've read about it. And me fading out, I didn't know whether that was like me dying. I didn't know whether I'd fade back in. So it felt like within seconds, my mum was there, my husband was there already, poor him, witnessing this absolute car crash. My mum was there, and then my mother-in-law was there as well. So I managed to see them before I went for surgery. And then when I came round, they said, "Oh, we've saved your tube." And I just thought, why?
Yeah.
Thank you, but why? So yeah, it was all just very traumatic and dramatic, but I can't believe how much things went from 0 to 100 in such a short space of time.
We are delighted that this episode of the Fertility Podcast is sponsored by our friends at One Day Tests. Whether you're thinking about starting a family or are already trying to conceive, getting a blood test can be a really powerful tool to support you on your fertility journey. And let's face it, we all know that it's a journey that can be fraught with challenges and uncertainty. However, doing a blood test is really straightforward and everything you need is in the box. I've just done one. And it's so simple. You press the lancet firmly down on your fingertip and gently massage your finger to allow the drops of blood to collect in the collection tube. Then you pop it back in the post. It's so simple. And getting a blood test done with One Day Tests can really help shed a light on things that can affect your fertility, such as your egg reserve levels, hormone imbalances, and other possible issues, for example, PCOS. More importantly, fertility blood tests can give you the insight to what you need and can empower you to take the most impactful next steps in your fertility journey. It will really help you take the guesswork out. One Day Tests offer a large range of fertility-related blood tests for both men and women at really affordable prices. It's super flexible and can customise your test and have it done at one of their 9 clinic locations. Or if you're far away, don't worry, you can do it in the comfort of your own home using their home testing kits. Results are returned quickly with an easy to understand description, which you can access online and download to share with your healthcare practitioner. So to find out more, visit onedaytests.com, and you as a podcast listener can get a 10% discount by entering the code TFP10. So thank you to One Day Tests. They're really giving you the power to manage your health and your fertility. Yeah, and I get that. And the whole why, I think it's important to say that a ruptured ectopic is a medical emergency is that if you rupture a fallopian tube, you can bleed. You bleed, and it can be life-threatening. So thank goodness you were in the right place at the right time. Absolutely. And that they were then able to do what they needed to do. And obviously that went very, very quickly once you got to that point. And you mentioned there 2 things. Firstly, what it sounds like you went through has been incredibly traumatic.
Yeah.
And hang on, I could come back to trauma in a minute. Sorry, Ella, we'll edit this bit out. I'll come back to that bit in a bit. I'll ask you about the ectopic first, the saving the tube first of all. So you mentioned there about saving your fallopian tube and you felt like, why?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So when I had my surgery last year, they did say before they ever take a tube, they'll check the other one to make sure that looks healthy, so that once they've taken a tube away, they're leaving you with a healthy tube. So they cut into my left tube last year, found a little bit of endometriosis, took that away, then I guess sewed it back up, which will have caused scarring in itself. And then this time around, there's been an ectopic in my left tube, so they've gone back into the tube. So it's basically really scarred now. So if I wasn't at a high risk already, I just feel like my risk is now even higher. That I don't want a natural pregnancy again. I don't want to do it to my body, to do it to my mind, to do it to my heart. So I just think my options would have been much more clear cut if it was just gone. Basically, when I have fertility advice, treatment, support in the future, I don't want my presence of a tube to take away the option that I really do want, which for me at the moment is IVF. So I just feel like I've been given an option that I just wish I didn't have, which sounds very ungrateful because they've obviously performed a magnificent surgery with lots of skill, but I'd rather they hadn't. Really.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, because what you've been through and the trauma that you've been through is horrendous, and probably the last thing that you want is to go through that again. And so therefore, that must have left you with quite a lot of fear of getting pregnant again and maybe seeing that positive pregnancy test again in the future.
Absolutely, especially because when we had our first ectopic, they said, next time you get pregnant, come to the early pregnancy unit at about 6 weeks so we can rule out ectopic, so that if it is ectopic, we can act really quickly. But we acted really quickly this time, and I was on their radar really early. I had the methotrexate treatment and still it ruptured while I was in hospital. So even though when I was in writhing pain, still we waited for the rupture. That's what my mother-in-law said. She said to the doctor, she said, are we just waiting for a rupture though, if she's in this much pain? You know, methotrexate has a success rate of 95%, but it's failed on me twice. So in the future, if I was to get pregnant naturally, it still wouldn't comfort me to think, oh, well, I can go to the early pregnancy unit for monitoring, because I've had that twice and it's resulted in surgery twice. So,
and how are you dealing with what is obvious trauma then? Trauma from, you know, the fact that you were lying there asking for your mum because you were worried that this was getting really serious and potentially life-threatening. How are you dealing with that, plus the trauma of and the being scared of getting pregnant again?
It's definitely a lot. In terms of the future, I feel quite optimistic because I know that there'll be options. I'm fertile, I have a tube, there's lots of treatment options, so that I'm okay with. I'm more heartbroken and traumatized for what's happened recently. It definitely goes up and down. Like today I feel like will be a good day, and yesterday was a really good day, but the 2 days before that were really bad. I feel like I'm still in that phase where like adrenaline pushes you through the day, and I don't like right now, I don't feel like anything bad has happened to me recently, but I know that it has. And it's a little bit like when someone dies, and in that first week you're so full of adrenaline and funeral plans and things that keep you really busy, but then after, when the funeral's done, you sober up, and that's when the sadness like creeps in. And I felt much better when I felt in physical pain, because I was focusing on, when do I have my painkillers? Oh, let me check my stitches. Oh, I'm quite achy, I'm sore, this is happening. But when I felt physically better, that gave me time to sit and reflect emotionally, which was much harder. And I just didn't expect it. In hospital, I felt quite upbeat, but it's just because I was running on adrenaline and the distractions of signing forms and thinking about treatments and talking about anatomy. That in the past probably 5 days, that's when I've sat and reflected and just felt really, just thought about the trauma of it and how much of what could have happened, but what didn't happen. It's really complicated. And I did find that when I had my miscarriages, they were awful. Like they were really horrific. But the process of grief is really quite straight, or it was for me. I wouldn't want to say that's the same for every woman, but for me, it was really straightforward. You've lost something and you grieve for the loss. But with an ectopic, it's really confusing, because when you can feel that the pregnancy is failing, you feel really sad. But then suddenly you've got to talk about your own health and your safety, that it distracts you from that grief and you put the grief on the back burner, but then you have to bring it back off the back burner. So it's very complex emotionally. But today's a good day.
Well, I'm glad to hear that today is a good day, and I'm sure that it's going to be a process for you to get through everything that has happened in the last year, and particularly so recently. I hope that talking about it today has been a little bit cathartic, because sometimes that can be the case, can't it? That actually having the opportunity to be heard and to talk about your experience can sometimes be helpful. But I'm sure it's, you know, a road ahead of you, and I wish you all the very best in navigating that. Before I let you go, if for people listening, if there's one thing that you wish you'd known before, what would that be?
Probably how complex this topic can really get. I think my view of fertility and pregnancy was very naive, but I guess we are that way, especially if we're surrounded by people who have had seemingly smooth journeys, although maybe people haven't had smooth journeys but just haven't talked about it yet. I just didn't realise how complex it can get, and I've had to become a proper master of the topic, and I've researched a lot, so that when I do see the health professionals, I can advocate and I can not argue back, but challenge that no, that's not what I want. I've read this. I've taken printed NICE guidelines to my GP and said, this is what I've read here. So I guess, yeah, I wish I'd known how messy and complex it can be. But then I wouldn't want other women to have such a negative view of it, because for some people it can be beautiful and smooth, and I'm happy for them that it is. But yeah, I just didn't realise how much strength I would need for this part of my life. But we do always have a lot more strength than we think we have. I've dug it from somewhere.
Yeah, you found it, and you are an amazing example of somebody that has done the research, is able to advocate for themselves, and that can only be a strength. It really can.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jade, so much for coming in to talk to us today and talking so eloquently as well about your experiences. I'm sure this is going to help so many people. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I hope it will help. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I just found Jade completely inspirational. Everything that she has gone through in the last year, it's just beyond belief. But she is so collected, so together, so informed, knowledgeable. She's really advocating for herself. And I think it was so interesting, wasn't it, when she talked about feeling that just something wasn't right, and that she had to really trust her gut instinct. And that's not always easy for us to do. So yeah, what a story. And I'm sure you'll join with me in wishing Jade all the very best over the coming weeks and months as she recovers both physically and emotionally from everything that's been going on for her. I want to pick up on a couple of things that Jade mentioned. She mentioned about the treatment for an ectopic pregnancy, and there are various different types of treatment. So she mentioned the word methotrexate, and methotrexate is the medical treatment. It's a drug that you have that can help to resolve the ectopic pregnancy. So it sometimes means that you can do that rather than having surgery to remove the fallopian tube. And so, that's one way. The other way, obviously, is surgical, and you either remove the tube, or you can, as in Jade's circumstances, repair the tube so that you are able to keep the tube. But equally, I totally understand for Jade that's bittersweet, in the fact that now she's scared of getting pregnant again, understandably, and would very much wish that the risk of ectopic pregnancy could be mitigated against by IVF. So I think we'll have to see how Jade goes. She's going to keep me updated. She's going to check in and let us know how she's getting on. So that's great. So I will let you know when I hear anything. And also she plans to do some kind of work supporting some of the charities that have supported her. And she's got a lot of help and support from the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust, which I'll put a link in the show notes. And she wants to pay something back, and I don't blame her with that. So I hope that this episode has been interesting. I hope that you have an awareness now of what ectopic pregnancy is, how to look out for that if it were to happen for you, what symptoms to recognise in you. I think the bottom line is, if anything doesn't feel right, even if, like with Jade's circumstance, you haven't got the classic symptoms, don't delay, just go and get help and advocate for yourself so that you can get that help. Don't give up. So that's the end of this episode. We're back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. So we will be back in your earlobes then. Until then, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Podcast, which is brought to you by Nat Chat Productions. The music is composed by Parla. It's hosted by Kate Davis, and the episodes are put together by Ella Woodhouse and exec produced by me, Natalie Silverman. Before you click onto your next podcast, we'd love it if you could either click on the star ratings or write a quick review, as it's a brilliant way for others to know what you think. And even just hitting follow or subscribe really helps other people know it's worth a listen. Finally, just to say, you can follow the podcast on Insta at Fertility Poddy. Kate is at Your Fertility Nurse. And if you'd like to book in a consultation with Kate to understand more about your fertility and reproductive health, just visit yourfertilityjourney.com.